Greetings, viewers. Two quick videos. I want to talk about Adorno's contribution to the climate extinction movement, which is one of the most hopeful and interesting of the new political movements on our planet today. The first video will be about the concept of second nature, and the second will be about the concept of natural history. So first of all, second nature. To put this into context, I'll read a short paragraph from Adorno. This is in Negative Dialectics. This is page 74 through 76. And it's a section entitled Disempowerment of the Subject. Adorno is talking about how the revanchisms of his day disempowered subjects and convinced people to stay in line and to not rebel, not question authority. So, Adorno. The grounds of philosophical idealism, the control of nature itself, has lost the certainty of its omnipotence precisely because of its unstoppable expansion during the first half of the 20th century, as much because the consciousness of human beings lagged behind and the social order of the relationships remained irrational, as because it took the measurement of what was achieved, whose minuteness was measurable only by comparison to what was not achievable. The suspicion and presentiment are universal that the control of nature weaves ever more tightly, through its advance, the catastrophe which it also intended to ward off, the second nature into which society has overgrown. Ontology and the philosophy of being, and I should pause here and note, ontology and philosophy of being, these had very specific meanings for Adorno in the 30s, 40s, 50s. By ontology, the equivalent today for ontology would be the transnational revanchisms, and the equivalent today of philosophy of being would be transnational consumerism. Okay. Ontology and the philosophy of being are, next to other coarser ones, modes of reaction in which consciousness hopes to escape from that entanglement. But they have a fatal dialectic in themselves. The truth, which exiled humanity from the midpoint of creation and which reminds it of its powerlessness, strengthens the feeling of powerlessness as subjective modes of behavior, causing human beings to identify themselves with it, and thereby further reinforces the bane of second nature. Unquote. Powerful meditation about the problem of second nature. And second nature are all the institutions human beings have created out of our struggle to control and master nature, from simple things like agriculture, industrialization, productive forces, clock time, learning to tell time, etc. And there's this classic dialectic that we invent all these tools in order to create a better life or to do something, and then our tools turn against ourselves. So the same, we invent fire and we use it to burn people. We invent all these tools and then we invent guns to kill each other. We invent fossil fuel mechanics to do all these things and run our industries, and it turns out these fossil fuels are going to threaten all life on the planet. So this is a consistent pattern, and Adorno wants us to stop and think about it and work against the ideologies which say that this is okay and this is just fine, or just consume and don't worry about this. His point is, no, we do need to worry, but we also need to attack this notion that human beings are powerless and have no power and shouldn't have any power. That's the agenda of very rich, powerful plutocrats who want to control us, and we have to resist this. This is something that the climate extinction movement has actually picked up on, this notion of second nature. And one of the ways you can see this logic at work, and a very interesting connection between Adorno thinking back in the late 60s and the contemporary movements today working to change things, is the change in discourse over climate. One of the things the climate strike did was it changed the discourse of climate change, which is a nice, safe, linear term. And it changed that to the notion of climate catastrophe. And that was a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant discursive move. Extraordinarily subtle, and it's not just wordplay. In fact, that implies a whole kind of a politics of the subject. In other words, what the climate strike people realize is that it's not enough just to go after power. You also have to address the problem of that people feel powerless when faced with these massive powers that control them. So how do you deal with that? You have to give ordinary people a sense of agency and a stake and say that, no, you, even the smallest person, even a 16-year-old girl from Sweden named Greta Thunberg, can start a global movement by just saying no. Going out in front of the Parliament building with a single sign with her lunchbox, no one paid her any attention, and here we are a year later and 4 million people went out into the streets to copy what she was doing. And that's because the time was right and we have digital tools and a lot of things are starting to change. But it was a fundamental change from, oh, it's a problem, someone needs to do something, to no, all of us together need to start to do things to change our world. Because it is a scientific fact that we are in a crisis. It's a massive crisis, and it's extremely urgent that we shut down, just to be completely clear and specific, all the oil companies need to be shut down. 10,000 coal plants on planet Earth, every single one will need to be shut down. All the natural gas wells will need to be shut down. We need to go to carbon zero economy. Within roughly 10 years, we only have a decade and the clock is ticking on this before we do massive permanent damage to the ecosphere and literally put the lives of billions of people at risk. This is unacceptable. And the climate strike has done some amazing work at transforming powerlessness into these digital tools of empowerment.